Hi, Maddie. Welcome to the Integrative Health Coach Success Podcast.
Hi, Julia. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yes. Yeah. We're looking forward to diving into a few of your specific topics that I think you're going to be able to share with our listeners a lot of wisdom on. So I'm excited to have you and get started with our chat. If you could, would you give a little bit of an overview as to what you're currently doing with your IHP certification in the health and wellness space?
Yeah. And we'll get into my story after, which will, I think, be like a better picture of why I even decided to enter into IHP to do levels 1 and 2. To answer your question of what am I doing with it now, I would say the most profound way that I'm using my IHP certifications, more importantly, the knowledge that I've taken away from it, is implementing it into my own life, number one, because we can only heal if we are healed ourselves as well. And, healing it's not a linear journey, right? Like it's always a journey. So I am not perfect, nor will I ever be perfect. That's not what I'm striving for myself or any of my clients or anyone really. But, I did have to do so much work on myself beforehand, and not just IHP, but all of the schooling and education that I have received has been a huge part of that, helping me understand how the body works, how the mind works, how they work together. It does everything, right? It's so complex, but also not at the same time. Like you need to have that knowledge, that foundation. And then from there, and this is what I do now, is it's, just like healing, learning is a lifelong journey as well. So I loved my IHP certification program. I did a lot of work before it. I continued to do work after it. The biggest way that I use it now, it was just to support my body and to support my health and to support to support how I help others as well. It's so amazing to have an integrative foundation, because I remember when I was looking into programs originally, I was looking at some Ayurvedic specific programs. I was looking at TCM specific programs. And since then I have done those programs, but I'm so happy that I did IHP first, because I wanted that full encompassing foundation, right? I wanted to learn a little bit about everything and from there decide what resonates with me and what is going to be my main method of healing. So yeah, that is what I do with my AHP. I have my certification always up on my, actually, I don't have my diploma up. I have to set my board certification up behind me, but I really encourage everyone, if you're on the fence about it, there's absolutely no harm, only good that can come from the IHP program. Because again, it's like that, especially level 1 is like this intro of like, okay, here's all the stuff that you should know if you want to be in the health and wellness space. And also, let's help you decide what avenue specifically you want to take, because there are so many routes and paths, careers within this space. So what resonates with you? What feels natural for you to do and for you to step into? So it's a beautiful stepping stone. It's a very powerful stepping stone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that nobody has ever first said, when I've asked them what they're doing with their IHP certification, nobody has ever first said, I use it to get myself well. But a lot of people, that is actually what they did first, right? They had health challenges, they got themselves well, and then they wanted to kind of share it with everybody that they could. And now they're working with clients. But I think it's so important for us to kind of remember that first and foremost, like we're only as good to others as we take care of ourselves. And if we're not, doing all of the things, right? The de-stress protocol, we're not eating well, we're not sleeping well, we're not going to be able to kind of translate any of that meaning to others. And so it's, so important to remember that it's for ourselves too.
Absolutely. And I think it's very important to live what you preach as well. So I specialize, I focus in women's health and hormones and cycles and fertility, and everything that I educate on, I also do myself. So I think that's super important as well. And I've been fortunate to meet so many incredible people in the natural medicine and health and wellness space via seminars and online virtual webinars. And I meet so many people, a lot of doctors too. It's usually doctors, but that just do not live a lifestyle that aligns with health and happiness. So I think it's very important. It's a very important way that I live, something that I live by is to actually live what you preach, and to experience it yourself before you can speak on it. Because I think, yes, you can look at research, but also you have to take all of that with a grain of potassium as well. So it's like, how can you find credible research, analyze that, but then also anecdotally like experience it yourself so you can speak on it. And that's what I really resonated before I, decided on IHP. I was already following Dr. Stephen Cabral and his work, and I read his book, and I knew that he was one of those. He was a naturopath doctor who actually lived by what he preached, and he wasn't so dogmatic about it's this way or no way, which was very important for me as well. And I'm very hesitant. I'm extremely hesitant of any guru or health professional who is so dogmatic and extreme about diet and lifestyle, because that's just not the way that humans work. Like, we're all so different, and, we come from different backgrounds. We live in different places, the climates, the nature of our lives, how we work, how we live. Everything is so different. So there's not a one size fits all. And I knew that whatever program I went into in that moment and beyond, I wanted to make sure that they had that approach. So yeah.
Yeah. And even, I have female clients who I've worked with before they even thought they were going to get pregnant. And then I worked with them on a prenatal journey and then postnatal. And even that one individual has very different needs in every little season that they enter. And being able to kind of pivot with whatever your client's going through is a super important, I think, value that we can have as a practitioner. Because people's lives change, even if it's the same individual that you're dealing with, their individualistic needs, talking sometimes hard, it changes as their lives change, right? And being able to understand that and pivot with the client is also incredibly valuable, I think.
Especially as females. I mean, we're changing on a day-to-day basis. Mm-hmm. And that is why I'm also so passionate about what I do, is because so many things out there, even the natural health and medicine advice, a lot of it out there is still not quite there yet in terms of being bio-individualized for females, and how unique we are, and how we have this entire separate biological clock known as the infradian rhythm, and how all these vital biomarkers are changing throughout the course of 21 to 35 days. And it repeats on that cycle. If, of course, you're not on hormonal contraceptive that is halting ovulation, or any other type of medication, or, hypothalamic amenorrhea, etc. So that's why it's so flippin' cool, not only to be a practitioner within this realm, but to also be a female woman myself and to resonate with this. And I breathe this every single day. I wake up and I, take my basal body temperature and I see where I'm at. I do a little check-in with myself. The foods that I eat, the exercise that I do that day, everything more or less is fit to where I'm at in my cycle. And because of that, I feel amazing. And it's really not that hard. At the end of the day, it seems so scary and so daunting. And I was there once before. And so that's why I want to help other women understand their cycles, understand their unique bodies, and that these symptoms that they're experiencing, these signs, are just like little nudges, like, hey, something's going on here, we need some extra support. And so that's, in a nutshell, what I do. And what even got me into this space to begin with was I struggled with my health for so long. I was sick and labeled with a bunch of different diagnoses, from a very, very young age, anorexia and depression, anxiety. I had extreme panic attacks that was sending me into the hospital, especially during my undergrad years, because I just truly thought I was having a heart attack when I first started experiencing them. I was very confused, and I went in and the nurses would say, it's just anxiety. We're gonna, give you an IV of Xanax. And I remember just being like, that can't be like the only thing that's going on. And this can't be my life moving forward, like in and out of the hospital and sick and, extreme body dysmorphia and just overall like hatred for myself. I was like, this can't possibly be it. And towards the end of like an 8-year battle with an eating disorder and everything else that I named before, my mom had found an integrative health and medicine clinic right outside of Chicago. And that's where I'm from originally. I don't live there anymore. It's too cold for me. But that's where I'm from originally. And we would commute there. It was an hour to get there. So we'd commute 2 hours every single day, Monday through Friday, to get to this clinic. And it was the first time. My parents they're gems. I mean, they did truly the best that they could have done. And what was such a tough, foreign situation for them. And we did the other things before. I mean, I was hospitalized, I was inpatient, I was partial inpatient, all the things. We did the Maudsley approach, all of like the conventional gold standards for eating disorder specifically. That's what they're really trying to address. And heavily over, I was like, do I want to say heavily or overly? Both, medicated as well. And I got to this clinic, and it was the first time I was ever approached by medical professionals who actually didn't want to prescribe me medication, and they could, and they said, we can if it gets to that point, but let's focus on nutrition. Let's focus on sleep. Let's focus on quality supplementation. We were running functional labs, and I was getting a vitamin IV, all things that I was a little skeptical of as a, senior in high school at the time. And I was like, how could eating more fruits and vegetables, and obviously it went beyond that, right? But like in my head, how I was registering, I was like, how could that work? But I knew that I didn't want to be on medication anymore. I knew that I wanted to feel better. And, when you're approaching a standstill, you're like, okay, I keep relapsing. I need to change something clearly. It's like, growing plants, which I do all over my house. But it's like, if a plant is not growing where it's at, clearly it needs something different. Even if Google or your plant app tells you water every 2 weeks, like clearly that's not working for it. So, anyway, we tried this, and it was the first time that I actually experienced relief. I was starting to feel better. And I was introduced to herbal medicine, which is why I went down the herbal route as well. And so I thought, young me, I was like, oh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go study nutrition and dietetics. And which I did. But I quickly realized that was not my calling personally. And I did excelled at it. It was very easy for me, but it didn't line up with everything that I was doing within the integrative health and medicine clinic. And that was something like I noticed pretty much within like the first semester of school of undergrad. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And really just my eyes were open from like a patient level, a student level of the inner workings, so to say, of the system. And so when I graduated, I knew that I wanted to go to a naturopath school. I wanted to study herbalism. Eventually I found the IHP program as well. I studied for IHP. And I'm still in school right now for so many different things. I don't think I'll ever not be in it. I told my partner, I was like, I just want to let you know that I am probably always going to be in school, but I love it. It's not something stressful for me. It's something that I truly enjoy. And I love that structure as well. I love being in a classroom. I love being with other people, especially when it comes to herbs and having your hands on. So that's what got me into this space. It's, it took so long for me to heal my own body. But once I finally got to like the bright side, to like the natural side, and I started working with herbs, and I eventually also weaned myself off of hormonal contraceptive, which I was taking for 6 years. I got my cycle back slowly but surely. And it was just on this beautiful, beautiful journey. And, I had a lot to address. My gut health was very poor. have a double MTHFR genetic mutation, and I didn't know that till much later. So a lot of things made sense though afterwards, a lot. And, just really working on my mind and my body and moving forward, like I understand now, at least for like this body that I have in this current moment in time, I understand how to take care of it. Like I understand what my body likes and what she does not like. For example, staying up really late and not getting the best sleep. I am literally a zombie the next day. It really, really impacts me, which is kind of funny because I have a partner who's kind of the opposite in that department, but he's also a male and has a very different anatomy and physiology than me. He's totally different. And I love that. It's very interesting to know. Yeah.
Men in general. I mean, like if you think about it, right? Like they were meant to kind of be wired to hunt and gather when it was necessary, or like stave off a threat when it was necessary. Like that was their job in thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. Right. And me, I'm like, I'm going to bed with the kids. Sorry. At 8:30, 9:00. But like that was the role, that's the kind of biological role as a female, right? So if we think about like just the physiological, sure, we have lots of opportunity now as females to kind of be more than just like a mom, right? And staying home with our kids. But if we still think about like biologically and at a physiological level, like what each human was designed for, it kind of can make sense that like men are a little bit more resilient to like, going out, and he'll like go to the store at 9:00. I'm like, what store is open at 9:00 anyway? He's like, lots of them, go to bed. But like he's going to get something done, right? But that can be, and like you said, if you're in tune with what your body needs, you're able to take care of it. And then it takes care of you, right? It's just this like beautiful cycle of you're filling up and it's kind of coming out, whether or not you're taking care of clients or not taking care of clients, but guiding clients, or you have a family or your friends, anybody you're showing up better for.
Totally. Yeah. And also on that note too, our hormonal landscape when we are on hormonal contraceptive is so different. And this just popped into my head as you were talking. But when I was on hormonal contraceptive, for example, not that I felt my best and healthiest, I want to preface with that. I didn't. But I was going on 6-mile long runs 6 days a week. And I was doing kickboxing sometimes with that and hot yoga and all this stuff. If I were to do one of those days now, especially when I'm on like my period or the week leading up to my period, the luteal phase, oh my gosh, I would be a mess. Yeah. And so it's interesting to, be like, oh my gosh, that was just, that wasn't that long ago. Like 5 years ago, I could do that. And now that would really, really do a number on my emotional and physical health. So yeah, everything's always changing.
Yeah. And do you think that has a little bit to do with maybe, because I think some of that like constant, whether it be like exercising all the time, or it can kind of be like a little bit of this like not numbing sensation, but you're just like going through the motions versus like now you're so much more in tune with your body and like you're actually paying attention, right? And so you're able to see, okay, this is how that affects me, or this is good for me this week, but it's not good for me, in 2 weeks from now. Yeah. And you're able to just like be more open to the idea of what's good for you and what's not.
Yeah. It's so crazy how the more you take care of yourself, the more you notice then when you don't feel well. Yes. Like it's so true. I think it's partly like I did feel numb. I felt like a zombie in some ways when I was on the pill personally. It really dulled a lot for me. But also, I'm much more grounded and conscious now. And I mean, I noticed like if I had a little bit too much of matcha and I noticed my heart starts to get faster, that's something that I never would have noticed back then, because also it's kind of normal for me to feel anxious all the time. And like, I need to like run from something. And now when I start to feel that, I like notice it right away. And I'm like, all right, we're going to do some bagel toning. We're going to hum and sing and chant, and then boom, I'm regulated again. So yeah, I definitely notice a lot more now. I'm much more sensitive to things. I mean, we'll be standing in line at the grocery store, and if someone in front of me, and I have no idea what's happened, but I can pick up their energy if it's negative. we'll get in the car and like, I need to do Braxton and I will literally do it together. Cause I'm like, I will carry this with me for the rest of the day if we don't do a little like, kind of getting it off me. So yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I've always, on that note, just like a little interesting side note, and I used to hate this, but now I'm embracing it a lot more. I've always been called like the sensitive one in my family, especially out of all 4 of us siblings. I was known as the emotional and sensitive one. And I'm like, it was my superpower. So
Yep. I'm the same way. Yeah. It was like, I was sensitive in like 2 extremes too. Like I would be able to feel like when times were really light and happy, and I would be like, that was when I would be in my glory. But yes, I still do absorb so much. Are you a projector? Do you know anything about human design?
I'm actually I'm an emotional generator.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like all these different modalities just allow us to get to know ourselves better, so that we can tune into what we need more of, what we need less of, because the truth is that at any moment, we're kind of shifting and changing with frequencies, energy, everything that we're kind of experiencing. And the truth is there's no like one, right? Like in that moment when you left the grocery store, if you're like feeling, imagine if you were like, I need a supplement for this, if you only believed in supplements, right? There isn't any, right? But you just kind of dealt with your energy in that instance, right? But, maybe if you're drinking too much matcha and you have a little L-theanine, like you feel better. Like there's just so many things where not sticking to like that one size fits all is so important.
And life is just so much more cool when you are very present, because you pick up on things. Like I know now about myself, and this is why I'm so happy that I, finally my organic herbal sleepy supplement is out. But even with sleepy, I mean, the full moon makes me very restless. And for like a night before the full moon and 1 to 2 nights after the full moon, I will wake up at least once throughout the night, which also I learned something very interesting not too long ago about sleep, about like our, ancestors before we had artificial light and we were going to bed much earlier, especially during like the winter months, that it was actually normal to wake up in the middle of the night to kind of sleep for like increments of 4 hours. But now it doesn't really work with the current way that we live, and most of us at least needing to be in the office, whether that's at home or actually in like a physical office in a building at certain times. Our schedules now are much different and demanding than they were, thousands of years ago. But I just thought that was cool.
Remember that too, if you ever work with clients who have babies, or if you ever have children, we live in this culture of like sleep train these babies and get them to sleep through the night. And like, the baby that sleeps through the night is like the gold standard, but babies are supposed to wake up. Like they even, and you were saying like adults, but babies like have this clock of like 3 to 4 hours too, where it's natural for them to have sleep and wake cycles.
And
it just matters how quickly or, easily they get back to sleep, but waking is not unusual.
Right. Yeah. And I thought that was a super like almost empowering thing to know too. But also, why many of us feel so tired when we do wake up in the middle of the night is because perhaps number one, like it's connected to something else. It's not necessarily like a healthy wake up. It's like, oh, you drink too much caffeine or you that day, or you are really, really stressed and your liver needs support. So more often than not, it's that, but also like like I said, like our lives are just not suited for that. Like we don't have the time to like take those siestas, which I lived in Spain for, like a year and a half. And I love Spain. It's my ultimate goal to get back there actually. But we would take siestas every single day. And I swear that was like the time that I was like one of my healthiest for sure. And I wasn't even, I was eating, I guess, pretty healthy, but also like we drank wine at almost every meal. And, we would eat gluten, and I wasn't eating dairy then. I was vegan then. I'm not now. But it's just interesting to note that like, just they still account for that nap during the day, but our lives don't really account for that over here in the States. So, but yeah, anyway, getting back to, I go so sensitive around the full moon. It's so cool to notice that instead of being hard on myself for those few days every month where I'm like, oh, I'm not sleeping well. And then I'm anxious because I'm not sleeping well. I'm just like, oh, it's the full moon. It's just cool to notice things. It's cool to be connected to the earth, to be connected to other humans. It's natural. Like we're all connected to each other. So I just think it's such a beautiful and fun way to live, to notice things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And what I would love to kind of switch gears to next, and you kind of just alluded to it with your sleepy herbal tincture, I think is kind of what maybe had just come out. You have started an herbal supplement line. And I would love for you to share a little bit with the listeners, because there might be somebody else out there who's kind of thinking like, oh, I would love to, get into some sort of product development and what it entails. Clearly, you're probably just very passionate about the herbal side of things and how that had personally helped you. But give us a little bit of insight as to kind of how that all came to be.
Yeah. So I mentioned that I got into herbalism when I was in undergrad.
Mhm.
And that was not because of my studies in undergrad, but because of what I was doing for my own health on the outside. And what really, really opened my eyes to herbs were, we were using them for stress reduction and for sleep, and they worked for sure. But I was still on birth control at the time. There are other things that were going on they were like kind of fighting with each other. So
Mhm.
I didn't sleep the best, and I wasn't the most Zen person by any means during undergrad. But really, it was when I contracted Lyme disease, and we used a 4-month herbal protocol, completely reversed all symptoms. And I was like, whoa, this is, these are pretty powerful. So I decided to go study herbal medicine, clinical herbalism. And in terms of creating a supplement line, and I prefer to actually call them herbal remedies, but I know most people I'm even working with like my website team, and they're like, it's better to actually say supplement. I'm like, oh, it's an herbal remedy. But so the concept for Soothe, was my first, I have 3 products. I have Sleepy, which I just launched last Friday. I have Bitters, which I released in July of last year. And then I have Soothe. Soothe was my first formula. It came to life right before I was hopping off of hormonal contraceptive. I was on the combo pill, and I knew that I wanted a full spectrum, like comprehensive herbal remedy to support me when I had already come off the pill. So to support ovulation, kickstarting again, to support overall regulation of my hormones, of my entire cycle, to prevent any of those, I heard these horror stories of you're going to experience post-pill syndrome and acne and anxiety. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was really, really worried about the anxiety, because that's something that I actually have experienced a lot in my past. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want this to send me off the deep end. But I was still like, you know what? I know in my, like deep in my heart and in my gut, like this is the decision I need to make. I need to hop off hormonal contraceptive, but I want support. So of course I did the foundations, right? I was focusing on sleep as much as I could at the time, because the pill really impacted my sleep. I stopped the pill within a week. I was sleeping so much better, which is beautiful. Nutrition, stress reduction, overall, just like nervous system support and vagal toning, supporting detoxification as well. And then herbal medicine and quality supplementation as needed. I'm a huge fan of like quality functional supplements. I know a lot of people out there are like, you don't need supplements. And again, it's like so person dependent. And even someone like myself who does eat those 5 to 7 organic vegetables daily, a couple servings of fruit, is very conscious about like sourcing of my food and everything like that. I still need extra support. And it's improved for sure since I've incorporated now more quality animal products back into my life, like wild caught fish and bone broth from my local regenerative farm. Like I'm definitely bumping those nutrient reserves up, but it just goes back to like, everyone's so different. Like when I was vegan, I needed to take more supplements, and I took quality supplements, and, so anyway, Soothe, I just love the herbs and Soothe, each of them, especially like chase tree extract, also known as Vitex, and bupleurum root, and dongui. They've been used for thousands of years for women's health issues and struggles, and just overall to improve the vitality of our menstrual cycles. So I basically for me, it was just the research side, right? Like I knew that these were amazing herbs. And then, herbalism is, especially if you're doing formulation, is this beautiful art, but also it's mostly a science of like, okay, well, this is a warming herb. This is a cooling herb. This has this action on the spleen, and we need this, counteracting action as well to balance out this formula. So and sourcing for me was huge, right? Because they needed to be organic. Also, I wanted to use wildcrafted herbs as much as possible, but with wildcrafting, there's the whole argument, or I guess discussion, of if that's ethical or not and how to do that ethically. Because you don't just want to, especially when you're producing so many, you don't want to be wildcrafting all of them. You want to keep nature intact as much as possible. So we wildcraft when possible. And for me, partnering with a lab in the US was personally very important for me. So my lab is in California, and everything's done over here. We have herb suppliers all over the world. It really just depends on where we can get, the best quality of the herb. And again, always organic. We third-party test as well. And honestly, as woo-woo as this may sound, it's the truth. I swear I had the easiest time finding this manufacturer that I'm with, because I just I don't know. I just really manifested it. I knew what I wanted, and I wasn't going to settle for anything less. And I also am a very social person, and I go to all of these webinars and seminars as well. And I've just met so many people and asked so many questions, and found these people who are amazing, have so much more experience on me too. I mean, they're all in their 60s and 70s, and they're true OG herbalist, and also TCM practitioner, traditional Chinese medicine practitioners. The wife is actually an MD, but she's gone the more natural route. So it's this beautiful, awesome, badass team of us who, I say this is what I want, and this is what I'm formulating, and we all are on it together. So that's how I birthed it. I was just taking these herbs myself, and I didn't even mention this, but I was health and wellness blogging on Instagram and on my website, and a little bit of YouTube, but not so much at the time. So I had a following, a pretty decent following, and everyone was just so curious about what I was doing. And, one of the biggest compliments that I got starting a few months after stopping the pill and doing all of these things, including consuming herbal medicine, was you're glowing, you're radiant. And I was I love that, because I can't remember the last time I received that compliment. And I felt it too, I was hi, yeah, I feel it. Thank you for noticing. And so people just want to know, especially women. And I think it's one of the coolest things about us is that we are so great with communication, generally speaking, that I have not had to run one ad for my products, because women talk. And I'm on social media. Everyone just, trusted me and wanted to try it when I came out with it, and received so much benefit from Soothe alone that I hear this all the time. They're literally release anything and I'll take it at this point. And women just talk. So many people come to me and are oh, my sister told me to follow you, or my friend told me to follow you. My coworker told me. So, that's the really, really great thing. And I see it in my life all the time too, because, I have 3 herbals, but I am a consumer of a lot of other things. And I tell people if I take something or if I do something and it works, and I am the first person to say that, So, yeah, that's been the journey. And Sleepy is as what it sounds like. It's for sleep and also for your nervous system. And we have some thyroid supportive herbs in there. The beautiful thing about herbs, and I think why I'm so drawn to them, is number one, traditionally, it is a woman's healing art, which is beautiful. Of course, they're male herbalists, and I have them on my team too. So, always giving them love and credit for sure. But I think that's why I was drawn to it, also because one herb has so many different actions alone. So one herb, it just depends on what the dosing is at and what type of effect it'll have on the body. Also, what herbs is it paired with as well? Because combinations, it makes it even more powerful. So I love herbs, and I'm still always like learning about them. There's so many plants out there, and I moved to Texas a few years ago, and learning this climate, this terrain as well has been super fun. Because of course I know like the main medicinal herbs and plants, but to walk around just in my backyard, and now I'm with all these cacti, and I never grew up with cacti before, so learning and exploring them. Plants we don't use them. We consume them if we're like, so, grateful to do so. They are their own beings with their own ecosystem, their own everything. And, luckily we can actually pick them and extract their medicinal properties and use them to help our body regulate themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, while you were talking, there was a few points that I think, other listeners who maybe are, a little bit behind in their journey would be super important to highlight, which it sounds like you knew what you wanted to do and you knew what you were passionate about, but being connected and always learning in an atmosphere of other people who were just as motivated and connected and passionate about the same thing, right? Which kind of brought about opportunity and your team that probably you have now, right? And so I think like for other coaches listening, like it's super important to understand the benefit of connection with others who are kind of have just a similar heartbeat, right, to you. And yes, we are all very passionate about health and wellness, right? But then like there's these kind of subset little pockets of, okay, like you're super passionate about women's health and, herbalism. And then there's, pockets of other things, and kind of just finding those people that you deeply connect to so that when you have this, idea, big idea, small idea, being able to be surrounded by supportive, like-minded individuals who can kind of support you on that path is super important.
Absolutely. I think the saying is like, it takes a village to raise a child. It also takes a village to start a business. It takes a village to, I feel like, do anything in this world,
Sure. Yeah.
And
we were never designed as human beings to not be connected in that way. Like truly villages were a way that everything happened.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the slight downsides of things like, things being remote. And yes, we're able to connect remotely with so many more people, right? But like that actual physical community has kind of dwindled a little bit. And I wonder how that affects a lot of, the well-being of people in general, right? But I think if you use social media and technology and things like this well enough, you can kind of feel the same connectedness, I think, if you're present.
For sure. Yeah. And I think there are like a few studies showing, correlations potentially between, isolation and depression and such. But maybe Julia, you and I should run our own study on how that really impacts us on so many different levels.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a huge contributor. So if somebody's listening and they're like, where can we find out more? Where do we find Soothe? Where do you show up on social media, website, any of the kind of places where you or your products are?
Yeah. My social media so there are two. There's the Peace Love Hormones page, and then there's my page, which is just my name, except I couldn't get my name, so I have to put the in front of it. So it's the Maddie Miles. And then there's Peace Love Hormones. We're on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Pinterest, and yes, I believe that's all. And then we have our website, of course. So that's just peacelovehormones.com. All the herbals are up there. I have 2 ebooks. I have a menstrual cycle tracker. So you can just go ahead and download that. And I'm a big advocate for like the pen and paper method when you're first starting out and before you venture into the more like high tech apps, or even doing them at the same time, right? Like I use the Daisy thermometer and to sync it up with their AI system, but also pen to paper. It's just beautiful. So, and then I have the Hormone Harmony book, which are like cycle syncing information, which is coined by Alyssa Vitti. And it's just everything that has to do with changing your nutrition and cycle and all that nutrition, movement, business, everything with your cycle is what I meant to say. So that's all on the website. We have blog posts as well. Pretty much every one of my podcasts has a corresponding blog post because some people just like to read more. So all of that's on the website. Oh, and then the podcast is on Spotify and Apple, and that's just Peace, Love, Hormones. So it should be the first one that pops up. I don't think any other podcast has that name. So that's where everyone can find me. I hope you all do, because one of my most favorite parts about what I do is actually connecting with people, especially in what is a very digital business, e-commerce. And, I don't have like an in-person herb shop. So this is it's e-commerce and it's beautiful. And I love being able to connect with people in like Australia. It's, wild to me sometimes. I'm just like, how I can't even like wrap my brain around it, but it does get a little lonely sometimes. So I love receiving messages and knowing that my work is being received by people and that it's impacting people positively. So please reach out. Let us know if you listen to this episode.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for being here. This was such a wonderful conversation, I think with so much value. And I appreciate you sharing your story with our listeners.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. We'll talk soon, Maddie.